Okay, so this video is about the rational zeros theorem. The rational zeros theorem is a long way of telling you that all of the rational zeros of a polynomial come from the last term, the constant term, and the leading coefficient. Okay, so all of our rational zeros come from the constant term, okay, and the leading coefficient. And they're all going to be of the form P over Q, where P are factors of the constant term and Q is factors of the leading coefficient. Okay, so all of our zeros are going to be of the form P over Q, where P are factors of the constant term and Q are factors of the leading coefficient, meaning the coefficient on the term with the greatest exponent. Okay, so let's look at an example. Okay, so we're going to list all the possible zeros, and to do that, we're going to look at the constant term and the leading coefficient. Okay, so the constant term, our factors of 2 are 2, and it could be positive or negative 2, and 1. Those are the factors of the constant term, okay, and they're divided by all the possible factors of the leading coefficient. All right, so factors of the constant term, factors of the leading coefficient are either 3 or 1, meaning all of our rational zeros are P over Q. So these values divided by these values. So we could have positive or negative 2 over 1, or we could have positive or negative 2 over 3. We could have positive or negative 1 over 1, or positive or negative 1 over 3. Okay, so what these really are, if we simplify them, positive or negative 2, positive or negative 2/3, positive or negative 1, positive or negative 1/3. Okay, these are the possible rational zeros for the polynomial, oh dear, for the polynomial P of x. Okay, now let's look at Q of x. Q of x is x to the 4th minus 3x to the 3rd minus 6x plus 8. So we are looking at our constant and our leading coefficient, which in this case is 1. Whenever you have a 1 leading coefficient, it just makes life much easier. Okay, because the factors of the constant term are going to be plus or minus 8, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 1. The only factors of 1 are 1. So we're really just writing all of these numbers over 1. Okay, so positive or negative 8 over 1, positive or negative 4 over 1, positive or negative 2 over 1, and positive or negative 1 over 1. And if we simplify those, then we can kind of ignore that 1. So plus or minus 8, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 2, or plus or minus 1. So those are the possible rational zeros for Q of x. Okay, so I want you to see if you can find the possible rational zeros for these, and you can skip this one since I already did it for you. Okay, so go ahead, pause this video, and see if you can find the possible rational zeros for these 5 polynomials. Okay, so once you understand how to find rational zeros, that is always the first step in finding the zeros when given a polynomial. So if it says find the rational zeros, you want to start by thinking about the possible rational zeros. Okay, and from the previous practice problems, we know it's going to be factors of the constant term, 3 or 1, divided by factors of the leading coefficient, 2 or 1. And if we simplify these, it's positive or negative 3 over 2, positive or negative 1/2, positive or negative 3, and positive or negative 1. So these are what we're going to choose from. Okay, so step 1 is writing the possible rational zeros. Step 2 is using synthetic division to find zeros. So what you're doing is you're just testing these out, seeing if you can find one. Okay, so I'm going to write down my coefficients here. All right, and I usually start with 1 just because. All right, and we just want to use synthetic division and see if we can find a 0. And we're going to know it's a 0 because my remainder should be 0. Okay, and look, my remainder is 0. Okay, so we found a 0. So I didn't finish writing this here. Synthetic division. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this out. Once I'm down to a quadratic, this is something that I can factor. Okay, so step 3 is going to be to factor, to find the remaining zeros. All right, so we already found that 1 is a 0 because that divides evenly. Now we need to factor this. Okay, so 2x and x, and luckily 3 is only 3 and 1. Okay, so it's going to be a plus 3 and a minus 1 because when I multiply those, I get negative x. Multiply those, I get 6x, and when I add them, I get that middle term. Okay, so set that equal to 0. This one's going to give me a 0 at negative 3. And then this one is going to give me a 0 at 1/2. Okay, and those are my 3 zeros. All right, so these are the steps you want to follow. Find the possible rational zeros, use synthetic division, and then once you have a quadratic, you can go ahead and try to factor. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to try these 4. See if you can find all the zeros, and each of these is going to have 3 zeros. Okay, so go ahead and try these, and then you can check your answers.